Desde las sombras de Palacio Nacional.
Down to the muddy trenches of politics. This is the pigsty, the pig pen of politics, with Shemarano.
Greetings, inhabitants of the mud. Welcome to another wallow in the pigsty, the pig pen of politics. Get your buckets of indignation ready and adjust your gas masks because the stench of hypocrisy is stronger than ever. Brace your stomachs, because today the scent coming from Palenque isn't exactly that of the Chiapas jungle, but rather a rancid mix of hypocrisy and Cuban coconut atoll. Cynicism so vast it can't fit in hell anymore. Cheers. Today, the stench that emanates from the shadows of that estate has that foul stew of cynicism and selective solidarity they love to cook up. Let's talk about the longest retirement in history, the Macuspano donkey and his third resurrection. The rat came out of his sewer. I'm Shemarano, your untrustworthy communicator. Let's begin. No? Do you love the concept of retirement that old Guango has? It's fascinating. It's like that washed-up pop artist who announces his farewell tour every 6 months, just to see if he can still fill the Palenque. But no, Lopez Obrador doesn't want applause. Well, yes he does, he's always wanted them. But also what he wants now is for you, yes, you who barely makes it to payday, to reach into your pocket to save the Cuban regime. The de facto president, the one who keeps sending WhatsApp messages with a scolding tone from Palenque to the National Palace, decided that the urgent issue, the one that couldn't wait, was Cuba. Yes, my friends. Meanwhile, in Mexico, the searching mothers keep digging through the earth with their bare hands, and children with cancer are still waiting for chemotherapy that never arrives. The old man, stumbling, comes out to announce with a broken heart and a face harder than the ballast of the Maya train that he has created a bank account in Banorte so that you, who can barely afford the basics, deposit your few cents to the island's regime. That is the charity of the Messiah. Outsiders first, and as for those inside, let them fend for themselves. His mother literally didn't come out to ask forgiveness for the 100,000 disappeared, nor to offer condolences to the victims of the massacres. No way, that would be just politics, right? The great leader has reappeared to do what he does best, ask for money for Miguel Diaz-Canel's regime in Cuba. Yes, the very same one who represses journalists and imprisons dissidents while his citizens dream of escaping on a raft. What Mexican humanism? It turns out that universal brotherhood only applies if you have the single party card and a photo of Fidel in your living room. What nerve! While he settles into his hammock in the middle of nowhere, he goes out to wail, according to him, for the Cuban people who they want to exterminate. But pay close attention to the trick. My little piggies, he asked for money for a Banorte account under the name of some association, Humanity with Latin America. And who do you think is behind it? Well, the same as always, the usual intellectual types, the journalists who confuse the microphone with an extension of the morning press conference, and the writers who only write odes to the regime. The club of applauders now has an approved bank account, convenient treasury. The man who swore he was going to lock himself away to write books about conservative thought, probably to understand it because he applies it wonderfully. He broke his sacred silence again, but don't think he came out of his tropical hideout to congratulate the armed forces for the capture or alleged killing of Nemesio Oseguera Cervantes. El Mencho, no sir. He didn't come out to offer his condolences to the families of the soldiers and civil guards who fell in the line of duty during that operation either. That would be empathy, and in the Mexican Humanism Manual, empathy only applies to dictators. With Guayabera, without a doubt, it's the cynicism of being a street lamp. Anyone surprised? The rhetoric is the same as always, taken from the trunk of memories from the 70s. Extermination, ideals of freedom, defense of sovereignty. What nerve, says Lopez Obrador. Does it upset you that they're trying to wipe out the Cuban people? What apparently doesn't hurt him is the absolute failure of a communist system that has been starving its people for 66 years. But the party was spoiled quickly. Ambassador Ronald Johnson, Donald Trump's representative in these lands, came out to remind him that in the real world, outside the 4T bubble, help is not given to tyrants. Paraphrasing Marco Rubio, the one who keeps former President Johnson up at night, it was clear. The best way to help the Cuban people is by empowering them, not by feeding the regime that has oppressed them for decades. Take your medicine. Do you have to be really thick-skinned to ask Mexicans to finance a dictatorship? Meanwhile, in Mexico, clinics don't even have gauze. But of course, for this son of a thousand bitches, Cuba is the perfect excuse to show his anti-American colors. Does he love it? That was the best part, the diplomatic slap that came from the North. Ronald Johnson gave him a lesson in reality when he paraphrased Marco Rubio. It's an undeniable truth. Cuba isn't down because of an imaginary blockade, but because of the absolute control over freedom of expression and the kidnapping of an island that has become a de facto prison. Now, don't get distracted, because here comes the heart of all this mess. Why now? For breaking the silence, their tropical ostracism, right at this moment. It's not out of love for Cubans or social justice, it's because his protege, Mrs. Scheinbaum, is feeling the pressure from Washington. Donald Trump isn't playing games anymore. The president has become a monster, turned into a monster. The United Nations either accepts the help to wipe out the cartels or faces the consequences. Trump has already labeled the current administration as a narco-government. And since Chachis refuses to give up sovereignty, or rather to give up the partners of the mafia peace, the top boss had to come out of his hideout. López Obrador uses Cuba as a smokescreen while he tells us the story of the island's heroic resistance. What he's really doing is roaring at Trump from afar, trying to shield Scheinbaum from the threat of an armed intervention against the drug lords. Because fear doesn't travel on a donkey, in a guayabera. The most revealing thing about this digital tantrum from the former president is his reference to Lázaro Cárdenas. His fate is ours. What a confession. López Obrador isn't worried about the fate of the Cubans who have nothing to eat. He's worried about his own fate. He knows that if Trump decides to come into Mexico for the drug lords, he'll come too, for those they gave hugs to, for those they let go free in Culiacan, and for those who allowed the country to become a cemetery. While they were giving 3-hour press conferences, the equation is simple, my little piggies. Trump pressures Scheinbaum about the drug cartels. Scheinbaum doesn't know what to do because her boss has her hands tied. Macuspano comes out of retirement to invent a fundraiser for Cuba to say that the United States is the bad guy. The background is the fear that the fate of dictators and their accomplices will actually be the same for everyone. That old Guango knows for sure that his name is already on a list at the Department of Justice. Could it be that the Palenque Ranch doesn't feel so safe anymore? That's why he comes out saying they want to exterminate them. No, sir, nobody wants to exterminate the people. What the world wants is for the dictatorship and the impunity of those who protect criminals to end. This is where things take a turn and the whole act becomes fake. While the delirious old man, his protege, and the so-called welfare maid tear their clothes defending the revolution, it turns out that Miguel Diaz-Canel himself has already realized that the ship is sinking and there aren't enough rafts for everyone. The island's puppet president is already sitting at the table with the United States State Department, negotiating with Donald Trump's government. Can you believe it? Cuba is negotiating food, energy, and the economy with the Yankee Empire because the socialist system simply can't produce even a single roll for its citizens. And while the Cubans are already signing their armistice here in Mexico, the dynamic duo of the Fourth Transformation keeps swimming against the current, trying to give mouth-to-mouth resuscitation to a political corpse that has already accepted its defeat. But what about Morena's very important person donors? Does extinction really hurt them that much? Or Castro supporter? I have a better proposal than going around asking the wise people for money. Why don't you pass the hat among the true aristocracy of well-being? Now, they really do have money, and a lot of it. Here, I'll leave you a little list of donors who could fill that Banorte account in 5 minutes. Brother Lalo, Andy Lopez Beltran, and Daniel Azov could just give up 10% of their profits from the fiscal fuel smuggling in Pemex. Buys oil for 3 decades. Manuel Bartlett and family. 10% of the profits from the Huachi diesel smuggling that ruined the national electric system. Would that be enough to light up old Havana? Mario Delgado, the Secretary of Education, could contribute a bit of what he moved with the late Sergio Carmona to finance campaigns. The other son of a bitch, Gonzalo Bobby Lopez Beltran, the percentage of what they stole. The trafficking of ballast for the Maya train, which is already resting in European accounts, they could put a high-speed train on the whole island. Grandpa Monster, Adan Augusto Lopez, the supreme boss of the Barradora, could donate some of what his subordinate, Hernan Bermudez, managed. Requena, hand-in-hand with certain business groups of dubious reputation. Jesus Ramirez Cuevas, El Bañagatos, the star spokesperson, could withdraw 10% of what he received to print the Regeneracion newspaper with our taxes. And these are just some of this bunch of mobsters who could contribute thousands of dollars. The list is longer. What really blows our minds in this pigsty is the almost supernatural efficiency of the fourth transformation when it comes to their ideological causes. It turns out that the bank account to receive the pennies from the wise people belongs to an association called Humanity with Latin America. Any ordinary person who has tried to register a civil association in Mexico knows that the Servicio de Administración Tributaria takes months, if not years, to give you the green light. But for the Friends of the Messiah, oh miracle. The authorization arrived just days before the collection started. Everything was ready, ironed, and perfumed so that the tenant of Palenque could give the signal from his hammock. And of course, as soon as the Supreme Chief spoke, the whole apparatus moved. We have seen legislators and officials from the Fourth Transformation boasting about donations of 10,000 and even 60,000 pesos. But what is an open secret, and here we love gossip, is that mid-level officials are being politely encouraged to sacrifice part of their salary for the Cuban cause. From department heads to governors, everyone has to go through the Palenque scale. It's the same modus operandi as always, the famous tithe, a voluntary contribution that in this movement is more mandatory than paying the vehicle tax. If you have the privilege of serving the people, you also have to serve the old man from Palenque. And how can we not be suspicious if recent history has taught us anything? It's that where there are Morena collections, there's something fishy going on. They've already forgotten about the 2017 trust fund for others, the one that was supposedly for the earthquake victims, and ended up being a parallel mechanism. Political financing sanctioned with almost 200 million pesos by the National Electoral Institute or the famous airplane raffle. It's all a narrative of social justice that ends up becoming instruments of ideological mobilization. The former president no longer holds office, but he still operates as the main puppeteer with the total submission of Claudia Sheinbaum. It's a double game. He acts from retirement and the government legitimizes his whims, while here we organize fundraisers for a foreign government. In Cuba, reality hits the official narrative in the face. There you have journalist Joanny Sanchez denouncing how masked agents prevent her from leaving her own house without a court order, without explanation, just because the regime decides so. That is the sovereignty we are financing with Mexican taxpayers' money. It's the great moral simulation of the Fourth Transformation. They talk about freedom while supporting dictatorships. They talk to us about justice while ignoring the clandestine graves that are spreading like mushrooms all over the country. López Obrador remains deathly silent in the face of national tragedies, but becomes a songbird when it comes to defending the ideology of the 70s left. The show must go on and the script is the same. Victimization, questionable fundraising, and a lot of fear, all disguised as sovereignty. In short, my friends, the fundraising show is nothing more than another smokescreen to hide the fact that Mexico is falling apart. While they play at being Starbucks revolutionaries, if they idolize that paradise of hunger, lack of freedom, and misery so much, the solution is simple. Go screw yourselves and live there. Enjoy the system you defend so much. Let the final obituary of the regime be published, but you won't do it. You prefer to stay here, earning in pesos, spending in dollars, and sending to Cuba the money of Mexicans who actually work and who foolishly keep believing you. Mexico is bleeding. Mothers search for their children in deserts and mountains, with no one to receive them at the palace. But we have to send money to Cuba because the heart of the old man, Patas Miatas, says so. What generosity with other people's money? We will keep wading through the mud up to our knees, scratching at the surface so the truth doesn't stay buried, because as long as there's a Tully, there will be someone who drinks it all up. Keep wallowing in doubt because we'll still be here to throw some cold water on you. What do you say? Have you already gone to deposit your money into the account of the regime's friends? Leave it in the comments, give it a like, share, and don't let them keep making fools of us. See you in the next dive. Reality. Here at the Pigsty, the pigpen of politics, I'm Luis Berman. I'm off to enjoy a mojito and a cohiba to get into the Caribbean mood. See you on Thursday. Goodbye.
This is the Pigsty, the pigpen of politics with Luis Berman.